Here we're going to have an opportunity to talk about E-Rate.
Email. I wish it was that.
Go ahead.
Well, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity. I'm Laurel Ballard with the Department of Education, and I work on lots of different things. But one of my big duties is focus on digital learning and supporting school districts in digital learning, and that takes us from the infrastructure in the schools to helping teachers use technology effectively in the classroom. So I've actually brought an entire team, because as we get ready to talk about E-Rate, it takes a team to do this. So with me, I have Ken Reynolds, who is our Director for Information Management in the Department of Ed. We have Jenny Miller with the Education Superhighway, and I will explain who they are in just a minute. And I have Clem Jimenez behind the computer here for me right now. She works with ETS and is the E-Rate coordinator for the state. And over here we have Corey. Wow, Corey Kelly with Education Superhighway, but I want you to know he actually started on this project with us as a tech director in Sheridan too. So let me talk a little bit about what we're going to do and what we're talking about today, and why today is actually a great opportunity to be able to really kind of expand and build the partnership around E-Rate. So we really see that when you look at E-Rate, it is really about, we're going to talk about how we support districts in finding ways to fund the infrastructure around technology in school buildings. That's going to be the underlying piece of what we're talking about. And so we want to really talk to you about the fact that we have this federal funding districts can use, because they can also use some of these funds for the major maintenance that school facilities provides to them. And so we want to kind of talk about how we might be able to kind of really build up our partnership so that we can make sure that districts are best able to use that federal funding, because as a shocker, and I'm sure it will not be, when you start talking about federal funds, nothing's easy. And so we want to figure out how we can help support districts, because if we can get them to be able to use more of the federal funds, then that will extend our funds to be able to help them in the other ways and be able to use their funds to really support students in the classroom. So with that, this is what we're going to talk about. We want to make sure we're all on the same page to talk about what exactly does a school support, and I mean a school network support, because it's not everything, that it's so many things actually. We want to talk a little bit about what it looks like for a district when they go through kind of deciding that they need to do some technology work within their district. So we want to talk about what that might look like. And that really becomes important, because then that's going to impact how we might look at E-Rate and how they might be able to use E-Rate, what they need to do to be able to do E-Rate, which then is, we'll try to keep it high level so that it's not too complicated. But we really want to talk a little bit about our collaborative effort and how we have been working with districts and the Department of Education and ESH, or Education Superhighway, the Department of Ed, and the Department of Enterprise Technology Services, and actually this project, and I'll discuss it in just a second, actually started with the governor's office from the last administration. We also want to talk to you about the fact that we have been extraordinarily successful with Category 1 E-Rate under the Department of Enterprise Technology Services, which is talking about bringing internet to school building, because Category 2 is going to talk about the infrastructure inside the school building where there's opportunities to work. We want to make sure that we really talk about why we think we are missing out by not having the school facilities department at the table with us. And we want to figure out how to do that. We're going to talk a little bit about the data, and then we're going to talk to you about why districts are telling us they don't seek E-Rate funds, because if you have seen this presentation or some of the handouts that I think I gave you, that there's a lot of money sitting on the table right now for districts to be able to use. It's not as simple as that, because if it was, they would have used it. But there is a lot of money out there. So that's kind of our plan over the next little bit. Okay. Turn that one over.
Howdy. Thank you guys for inviting us to be here. So what does school network infrastructure support? What devices are on this? Well, it's the obviously iPads, the Chromebooks, the laptops, the desktops, all that stuff, servers, storage, all the data stuff. But you might be surprised to know there's a lot more running school network than most people realize. There are, in fact, your HVAC system, heating and cooling system, your door access control systems, school safety, student security, cameras. A lot of stuff you don't realize also, like, in fact, I was a tech director at Douglas before I took this job, and didn't realize that the swimming pool at the high school had a pH level detector on it that was networked, and it would inject chemicals as needed through the network. You never think about that stuff. So there's a lot more goes on with your network than just your computers, your laptops, your desktops. So that's important to realize. A lot of the infrastructure rides on the network infrastructure. And like I said, like the slide shows, the bell systems, the PA systems, your telephone systems, all that stuff is typically nowadays what's called over IP or Internet Protocol, the network-based stuff. Next slide, please. So, of course, my audience here is School Facilities Commission. You guys know this flow better than we do, so I'm not going to try to school you on what you already know. But typically, if let's use a typical scenario, a school principal may come to the tech director and say, "Hey, our wireless is really slow here. What's going on?" And the tech director does his due diligence and looks and he says, "Yeah, this network's been in place for 7 or 8 years. This wireless network is obsolete, antiquated. It's it's past its better days." And now with this initiative that most schools are moving towards, the one-to-one initiative where you have a device per student, the concentration of devices in a classroom, you might have 25 devices connecting to one access point in each classroom. That's a lot. And you don't typically even see that with in the corporate world. You don't have that mass number of devices trying to hit your network in such a concentrated amount. So, the tech director may look and say, okay, yeah, it needs to be replaced. So he may go to the superintendent, talk to the finance director or business manager and say, we need to get the ball rolling on what we need to do to replace this wireless network, as an example. And then so a conversation may be started. Sometimes the district may bear the burden by themselves to replace that network. Sometimes the maintenance director may fill out an Ames ticket with SFC and go out for RFP, get the bids, and that sort of kicks off the process. Again, I'm not going to preach to you guys about that process. You know better than we do. But and hopefully, if everything flows well, funding's approved, work begins, and in short order, hopefully, you have a new wireless system, and everyone's happy for a short time until it needs to be replaced again. So we all know with technology, it's a redundant process. It's obsolete sometimes before you even get it installed. So next slide, please. Okay, Jim, Quinn.
Hi, I'm Clem Jimenez. I'm the State E-Rate Coordinator, and I've been the State E-Rate Coordinator for about 18 years, give or take a couple years. So what I'm going to do today is kind of just give you an overview of what E-Rate is, and the beginning part of that is E-Rate stands for Educational Discount Rate. It was established to provide telecommunication services to schools and libraries across the nation at a discount. And it's established by the FCC under the Telecommunications Act of 1996. So E-Rate has been in place since about 1996. The state of Wyoming has participated in the E-Rate program since about 2000-ish, which was the inception of the Wyoming Educational Network, or Equality Network. That is when Wyoming really began to participate, because we were providing internet connectivity to all the schools. So it was a way for us to kind of recoup that money that we were putting out on a state level. So since 1996, E-Rate was pretty much ran in two areas: Priority 1, Priority 2. In 2014, the FCC decided that that was not meeting the current needs of the nation. So they did a complete modernization order on that. And what that created is Category 1 and Category 2. And the reason why this is important to us today is because way back in the very beginning, when we talk about Priority 1, Priority 2, it was just that. There was a Priority 1, which was all of the telecommunications, which basically got your internet to the door. There was no support for internal connections. Priority 2 at that time was a connection, basically basic maintenance, so your maintenance on your network. It didn't support a whole lot, and it was under what was called a 2 and 5 rule. So the school district can only ask for those funds and receive funds twice in a 5-year period. So schools really didn't find that effective. It really wasn't helping anything, and Priority 2 was only funded after all of Priority 1 was funded. So you have a pot of money that the entire nation is going after. If there was anything left after that, then you got Priority 2. So not every school district received funds. So when they did the modernization order, they came up with Category 1 and Category 2, which split the pot. So there's 2 separate pots of money that are accessible to participants. Category 1 still is all the telecommunication services, so your pipe to the door. The Category 2 now started dealing with your internal connections. So just as Ken pointed out, your switches and your internal in-building type of stuff, your Wi-Fi inside your building is when it began. So each year, E-Rate gives about $3.9 billion is available to all schools in the nation for Category 1 and Category 2. Since 2015, which is the inception of this new Category 1, Category 2 concept, Wyoming has actually utilized $3.6 million of that in Category 2. So what we've kind of struggled with is the concept that there's now a new pot of money out there that can be accessed to school districts to help with some of their needs within the school. We've been really successful, as our team has said, with getting the pipe to the door. So getting that circuitry to the door, but once it's in the door, there's not usually equipment that can hold the capacity or deal with the capacity. And so we have schools that are going out to upgrade those pieces, and that's what Category 2 is for. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask, because E-Rate is odd. So here is why Category 2 is so important. There is no waiting until all of Category 1 is funded. We have a separate pot for Category 2. And it's funded on a per student basis per school. So each school in Wyoming has about $150 per student available to them in their schools. So East High School has their own Category 2 budget. Central High School has their own category. Evanston High School has its own Category 2 budget. So it's per school, it's not a district cap, which you may see somebody say that a district has this much money left on the table. That is their whole district with all their school budgets in there, if that makes sense. The $150 per student was what it began with in 2015. That has increased a little bit each year per inflation. So each year they can get a little bit more and more money depending on, and it's all based on your school enrollment. It's also on a 5-year cycle. So as Category 2 used to be 2 and 5, you can only receive money 2 in a 5-year period. This one is you have a 5-year budget. So your 5-year budget begins the year that you first receive funding. So the first year of Category 2 funding was in 2015. If the district applied, their last year to actually use the funds that are available to them for their schools would be funding year 2019, which begins July 1st of this year. They could start in 2016 as well, but there was no real guarantee of where, caveat to all of this. Category 2 is a pilot project that was created under the modernization order of 2014. What that means is this is our trial period from 2015 to 2019 to see how these funds are used and see if they're actually being used in districts and are helpful to overcome that digital divide, which the FCC was required to provide a report on how that would happen, since we're going into our last funding year to use these funds according to E-Rate. they had to do a report to see how everything was coming, how it worked out basically. So the report was recently released, but we still don't have any idea of what this Category 2 budget is going to look like moving forward. So base case scenario, it continues just as it is. The districts still have those funds within their budget, the Category 2 budgets, to use. So I know that's a little confusing, so if you have questions about that, let me know, but it is a 5-year budget. So if they began in 2016, realistically, they have until 2020 to actually use those funds if everything continues the way it's currently settled. That makes sense? Yes.
If there's no change, does the money carry over then?
If there's no change, that's for the FCC to decide. So the report was just released 2 days ago. It was supposed to be released a lot earlier, but it wasn't. So they have to come to a decision before funding year 2020 to see if it's going to go forward as is, or if there's going to be some tweaks to it. We haven't had that final nod from the FCC to say that that's going to go forward exactly as is right now. Yes.
So 5 years ago, we had so many students.
Mhm.
So based on that student count, we got the $150, $150 per student, and that is in some sort of a budget somewhere.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so now 5 years later, we've got like 200 or 300 more students all over the state.
Yes.
Do they get?
They are adjusted. Yes. So what happens is every year, for every funding year, the schools are required to go in if they're participating, which honestly every school district participates because I file an E-Rate application for Category 1. So they're required to go in and update their school lunch program information and their total enrollment. So if there is an adjustment, or if schools collaborate or combine, because we have that happening quite a bit, we have smaller schools that are joining into one, that budget is then combined and becomes new school's budget. So if there is an increase in population because you close a school and those students go off into another school, and those school enrollments increase, their budgets will increase. Any other questions? I know it's kind of a fast, quick overview of E-Rate. So, I guess it's still me, isn't it? Okay, eligible for E-Rate. So under Category 1 is, like I said, is the telecommunication that's basically the pipe to the door. Category 2 is truly the internal pieces and parts of the network. So it's your access points, your antennas, your routers and switches, and that type of thing. So when you're doing a reconstruction or if you're doing any upgrades, these are the categories that they would ask you for money for that they could actually use E-Rate to get discounts on those services for, which has actually opened up quite a bit before because there wasn't hardly anything under Category 2 that could be requested. So the next piece, which talks about, is that still eligible? My head. So the procurement process, E-Rate, because it is a federal program, and if anybody's dealt with federal programs, they understand it's very strict timelines that you have to meet in order to get money, if that's what your optimal goal is. So with E-Rate, there are very specific tight guidelines and tight timelines that you have to meet or you don't receive the money. Base case scenario, every year, the bidding process or the procurement process for E-Rate begins in July. So they release a form that you fill out to actually let the world know that you're looking for these services, and that begins in July. So I typically, when I work with districts and I work with my team, I ask them to start looking. Literally, once my window starts, or my funding year starts, which is July 1st, I ask them to start looking at the next year. Where do we need to go? So kind of with the same concept with the districts. Once you've got done 1 year, start in July or earlier, May, when you start looking at your budgets, where you're going to go or what you're going to need for your schools. So you start your procurement process at that time. With E-Rate, it requires that you leave your bids out for a minimum of 28 days. Can't touch them, can't look at them. If you have any conversation with vendors, there's a very strict policy on how you have to make sure everybody knows what you talked about, kind of thing. Again, it's federal, there's a lot of strict guidelines. So those usually come back. If you submit them in July, you'll start seeing them around October, November. Your 28-day waiting period is over, and you'll start signing, excuse me, I'm getting this backwards. So you would actually do your Form 470 in November, which would actually open up your bidding window. You leave that open for 28 days, and then in January, December, you start looking at those bids and signing contracts. January is typically when the application for E-Rate window opens for E-Rate. Right now, we are currently in our application window for funding year 2019. So it's open for 75 days. And then you have 75 days basically to file and say, here are my services, I went out for procurement, here is what I'm requesting, here are my discounts, this is the money that I'm requesting from you. And that all happens between January and March. There's a whole other spew of process after that, but that's the biggest two pieces that you need to do in order to even participate in E-Rate, is put things out for bid. And again, you have to be sure that you're still meeting that 28-day waiting period, and then applying within the E-Rate application window. Any questions? I know, it's confusing, trust me.
Because Wyoming is such a rural community, you go out for bids. How do you handle those little communities?
Actually, that's where Educational Superhighway has been a huge, huge, huge advocate for us. What Educational Superhighway has done is actually they've gone out and researched who the telecommunication services or providers would be in that area. So they notify those vendors. As soon as they see a 470 or a bid hit, they notify those vendors to let them know, hey, there's a bid out there.
ESH will start making phone calls and say,
Yeah.
hey, vendor, do you know there's a 470 out
Right.
for this school that's looking for services, looking for work to be done in the school? They'll make the phone call.
We'll
Which
tell you
is-
more who we are.
Yep.
Which is great
Stay tuned.
because with E-Rate, you have to ensure that there's a fair open bidding process, which means everybody has access to that bid and nobody has any more information than any other vendor, and that's where they step in, because a district or even us can say, hey, I've got a bid out, can you let the vendors know? So it removes me from that, like, questionable, who have you talked to kind of thing. So they have been a huge advocate for that, and my my belief is that's why we have such a high Category 2 usage. It's not 100%, but it's definitely higher than it was when we started this collaboration. And that's because of their help and their input and actually alleviating some of that, well, I don't want to touch it because I know that's a sketchy part of E-Rate. They help with that.
That is a good question, though.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. It really is.
You guys do security check.
Yeah.
Do you have like a navigator or someone that actually, in your department, gets a hold of a certain person in each district?
That is kind of my role.
Yeah.
I am the state E-Rate coordinator, so I am responsible for outreach and training to all schools. They're laughing at me. They get bombarded by stuff from me for E-Rate for two reasons. One, because I do the telecommunications Category 1 for the state for all of the schools. All the schools that ETS provides connectivity to, I do the E-Rate application Category 1 for that. Because as soon I can't do some of the things I need to do unless the districts do their portion. So they are constantly, when I'm getting close to, when I'm getting close to that or when I'm coming up with due dates, they're in constant, I'm shooting emails to them all the time saying that, okay, we're getting ready for the next funding year. If you're looking at Category 2 or need outreach, if you need training, I've done one-on-one training with districts. With the help of WDE and Educational Superhighway, we've done group trainings for them. So I'm responsible for the outreach to the school districts for that.
Thank you.
But if I could add something, as far as Category 2, that's what we do as a collaborative, is try to reach out to the districts, even though there is no Category 2 coordinator. She's an advisor, she's not a coordinator. We kind of collaborate to reach out to districts and say, hey, if you need any help in Category 2, we're here. That's what this collaboration
So-
is.
Sorry. So with category 2, because it's so specific and it's very school specific, and we have no control over school budgets, it relies on the school to actually fill out those forms. I go through the same process that they go through, so that's why I reach out to them and offer help and assistance, but I can't fill the forms out for them. And that's where kind of one of our little stumbling blocks are.
Well, that's probably why I asked the question. We, I suppose as a commission, struggle with dollars all the time. Anytime we get 100% participation from the districts or any federal money, we're for it, at least I am.
Right.
That's our message. Thank
The
you.
more you can drive that message to the districts,
We have, I mean, it's a constant.
it seemed unfortunate that not 100% are participating.
So let me give you some background too to help you understand. So we actually put this collaborative group together. We call it Wyoming Classroom Connectivity Initiative in our world. And it actually came out of the fact that they were finding across the nation actually that districts were not using a lot of these category 2 E-rates. And I will tell you, it is not a simple process to go through. It is pretty complex. And so through the governor's office in the last administration, they asked the Department of Education and the Department of Enterprise Technology Services, and we actually worked with state library and school districts. At that point, Corey was part of the school districts, to kind of come together to look at how do we support districts with the infrastructure and how do we help them figure out how to use category 2 and figure out what the barriers are and some of those kinds of things. So we all came together as part of what they call the National Governors Association Policy Academy for broadband connectivity, and that's where we met up with Education Superhighway. And I'll let Jenny talk a little bit more about what they do, but they really do focus as a nonprofit on helping ensuring that districts and schools have connectivity, making sure all schools have connectivity at high levels. And so we've been working with them for quite some time, and we've been doing lots of things to help districts, and there's lots more we know we can do. I think that there is some opportunity. You're asking about how do we know our really small school districts, they have trouble getting anyone to respond to their RFPs. Sometimes it is none. And so there's some things we have been learning that we can do where we can start using things like if we can use some similar RFP templates, it makes it easier for vendors to respond. If we release them, if districts will release them at least regionally around the same time, it makes it easier to vendors to come up and take care of and service that area rather than just one school district, And so there's some things we know we can do, and and so we have been working on, well, we've done a lot of things. So to help support districts, we have done we did a couple of years ago, we actually went on a road show together to go to the school districts and really talk about, you'll see in some of the results we'll talk about in a little bit, that some districts really struggle with really understanding their network, and we have small districts that maybe all they are really able to afford at this point is somebody that can come in and fix computers and stuff like that, which is not the same skill set as you would have as a network engineer, those kinds of things. And so trying to help them with some of those pieces, and we've been starting to Clem's been doing training with school districts on how to submit all the forms and making sure they know when things need to be submitted and stuff like that. So we have definitely increased our usage of E-Rate. We have about 3.6 million, I think, that districts have used now, which is great. But in reality, we have over $5 million left sitting on the table as well.
I can talk. Hi, I'm Jenny Miller. I'm from Education Superhighway. So let's everything they said is obviously true. So let me back up. So a lot of this, there's a lot going on here, and then so you're probably like, why does this involve us? What's your name, ma'am?
Janet Anderson.
Jeanette? Okay. Oh, Janet. Okay. So her question actually was really good about Wyoming's a rural state. So if we're a national nonprofit and we claim to help connectivity, school connectivity, that means a lot of different things. And the more technical you are, the more you no, that's true, and so that's really going to depend on what your needs as a state are. So Clem here files Category 1 for all of the districts in Wyoming, and I work all across the country, and you guys are actually quite blessed to have Clem. She's one of the best in the country, but she won't tell you that, but she's extremely experienced, and she does a very good job at pulling down federal money for Wyoming and keeping Wyoming taxpayer money, as efficiently used as possible. But you're wondering probably why, or maybe you're wondering, why is there not a Clem for Category 2? And the reason is, remember when Clem was talking about Priority 1 versus Priority 2? Back in the day, before 2014, before they made this modernization order, Priority 2 meant it went in order of discount rate, which means for a rural state like Wyoming, all the large urban districts throughout the country, like LA Public Unified or Chicago Public Schools, are going to gobble up all of that money immediately. And basically, Wyoming tech directors, if I were a Wyoming tech director in that shoes, I wouldn't worry about it either, because it's not even worth my time to apply. We're rural, and the way they do the way they used to do the rank ordering, basically, for a small rural state like Wyoming, it's just, it's not really worth your time. However, after Category 2, after these changes, now it's the case that, they saw that that was a flaw in the system. I think Jaren's nodding. Like, there is $150 index for inflation for every student, no matter what district you're in. And so now this is a big opportunity. And so obviously we want to leverage these federal dollars. However, that takes, you can't just snap your fingers, especially with federal money with tons of strings attached. You can't just snap your fingers and get it in your district. I wish, right? So Clem has been very kind to kind of lend her time. I don't know how she has 24 hours in a day to do all this, but so Clem has been helping out to sort of share her knowledge on, from Category 1 on the Category 2 side, but strictly speaking, the tech directors are accountable for applying for Category 2 money. Does that make sense so far? I know it's weird. If even a moderate nod is like good. So the reason at Education Superhighway, we're a nonprofit, we work nationally, but the reason we're working on Category 2 in Wyoming is because you guys were frankly so far ahead of the curve connectivity-wise. You have the Wyoming Unified Network. The Meade administration was really big on connectivity, and so you guys have really good infrastructure basically feeding into the district. But then once you get in the district, within the district was sort of, that's the next step, but you need that pipe going in there first. But you guys already have that. So that's why we're working on this sort of special thing with Category 2. And Education Superhighway, this nonprofit, so we go out, we were defined to be a short-term project. So we won't be around anymore after 2020, which is sad. But because I've been working with these guys for 3 years now. They're friends and coworkers at this point. But yes, so we won't be around, and this was just sort of to get the initiative going, which is why Governor Meade wanted us to, come in and get this cross collaboration. That's why it's especially important that you guys are here, understanding why where did this Category 2 stuff come from? Maybe understanding why the challenges, why it might be tough for, for tech directors to apply. Also, tech directors in some of the really rural spots, it could be the principal. It could also be the basketball coach. It could also be to have a staffed person as a tech director, that's kind of a luxury. So you never know, the turnover can happen. So there's a lot of challenges that there's a lot of, room to help. So I guess basically I just wanted to say that I think it's, again, I work with a lot of different states, and the fact that we've got the Department of Ed, the Enterprise Technology Services, a whole other, association in the state here working together is very non-trivial, and the fact that you guys can cooperate, it just doesn't happen, really. So that's definitely an asset, and for my part, I just really want to encourage that continued collaboration, and basically the whole point of this slide is to say, we're not just making this up. We've had 3 years of work and success to show for this, and it's about you guys, and it's about the students here, and I think they've really benefited from it. So.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, of course.
The last, next to the last bullet, at the bottom there, it's very important. Wyoming leads the nation in Category 1 connectivity, broadband connectivity up to the school districts, and we want to do that with Category 2. Something to be proud of.
Absolutely is. Let me pause for questions. Anybody?
So in our last bullet here on this slide, we talk about the fact that what we really want to do is find a way to build a partnership that includes School Facilities Commission. Because if I go back to the slide that shows all the stuff that's included in E-Rate. A lot of this is stuff that school districts pay for through major maintenance, and when you're building new schools and that kind of stuff. And so there's some opportunities here that we may be able to use some of the E-Rate funds, and if we could find ways to make it easier for districts to use these funds, to use the federal funds to help pay for some of this stuff, then that means their major maintenance funds can be used for other things. And maybe some of those general fund dollars as well can then go back to these, things like that they use to fund either technology or other pieces, can go back into that classroom and support the students in the classroom. And so I think that there's some real opportunity for us to kind of come in and have you as a partner at the table with us so that we can really look at how we can make the major maintenance dollars and the new construction dollars for districts extend even further.
One piece that I completely left out of E-Rate, because I have E-Rate brain, and I assume everybody knows, but with E-Rate, it is a discount program. Mm-hmm. So basically when we say these monies are sitting on the table, they're pre-discount dollars. So every school district in the state of Wyoming has a discount rate, which is based off of their National School Lunch Program numbers, so they're free and reduced numbers. So the more rural you are, the higher discount rate you get. So E-Rate goes, Category 1. Category 1 goes from 20% to 90% discount rate. Category 2 goes from 20% to 85% discount rate. What that means is if you have a discount rate of 90%, you're still responsible for 10% of that cost. And that's where this comes in the whole discussion about major maintenance funds and that type of thing. School districts are struggling to participate in Category 2 because they don't have their district portion. So that's kind of why we're here to kind of collaborate with everybody to use and accept funds that may be available.
I'd like to add a couple of words to what you just said. I'm design and construction administrator for the division. These items that are up here are not eligible for major maintenance. So I just want to make sure some of these items are.
I meant to be on this one.
I'm sorry, that was
One of the limitations that we have, though, when we're doing major maintenance, and you were talking about before about capacities increasing and having to grow, major maintenance is not available for growing capacities. It's limited to the capacity you have. So that's where these funds would come in very helpful, because you could grow the capacity.
That's an excellent point. Yeah. And what's your name?
Paul Severson.
Paul. Yeah. No. So Paul makes a really good point. So we put our heads together, all of us, to try to figure out like what exactly do we want to say, and I think that's why what we settled on was like this is the beginning of a conversation with you guys, because you have nuanced information and knowledge that we just don't, that we never would, because that's in your department. You have that from your experience, and also how do you learn something? You learn something by doing it, and then you do it, and then you run into a problem, and then you learn from that problem, right? So I'm sure every one of you has years and years of experience of seeing what can go wrong, and here's the guideline, but then this can go wrong. So that is knowledge that we really want to have in the conversation. Secondly, this may be, everyone in this room knows it, but I think it's still worth saying. Wyoming has a strong tradition it's a rural tradition, and it's a strong tradition of local control. We need to respect that also. So we need to be able to, we're not trying to, even when we say there's an opportunity for crossover or for, major maintenance can pay for, using E-Rate dollars for, that's good. So identifying it is the first thing, but what we're not doing is trying to tell tech directors how to do their jobs. We're just trying to help, right? So I think that's another thing. And so, but that's very important. And so that's another thing where that's not an easy thing to figure out. It's like, how do we do that? How do we make use of federal money, which is not the easiest thing to make use of? So that takes a lot of, smart brains coming together and thinking about how do we do this in a way that's actually going to help our tech directors and our districts. Pause there for a second. Anybody? Questions? All right, how are we doing over here?
We'll go back to next one.
Is there a Brandon in the room? Brandon,
come on down.
You want to explain to him the conversation we had, if you don't mind, Mike?
So I'm Brandon Finney, and when WDE reached out, they said, hey, let's look at what the cost of the expenditures are in tech data. And so we spent obviously $3.6 billion in capital construction. So when I went to look at the numbers, well, we don't have the numbers because it's on vertical construction. It's lumped into the general contractor bid versus on horizontal when you're doing unit prices, cubic yards, linear foot, stuff like that. So the process, you know, a lot of you in here have done capital projects, so this, as you come up through the commission onto the legislature, you get allotment of square footage and dollars. And then within that budget, you go and run over and grab your IT guy and your architect and start designing what package you want in your facility. So when I heard this program, I just heard $5 million in the bank, and that's accessible. Really, almost in my head, take advantage and get that architect. And as Paul was alluding to, there's details on what can and cannot be, what colors of money can be turned on or off. And then maybe have them assist in designing that and what money flows to what items appropriately so everything reconciles. So it would help, and then maybe pull in an expert that could also assist the team as a whole to get to the goal. So, just out of curiosity, a show of hands, how many people have actually used this program? Love me. Cool.
Thank you. Awesome. Appreciate it. Thank you. Who's got this one? Well, there we go.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about, I'm going to just advance one slide for a second, and I'll come back and talk about it. But we have $5.6 million sitting on the table, and while districts are in the middle still dealing with the shortfalls in funding and they've had to make adjustments on, I don't know what I did in there. There's a lot of money sitting on the table, so why wouldn't they be using this money, right? I mean, it seems so no-brainer, right? It seems, Karen, no-brainer, but it's not. And so one of the things we did was ask them, why aren't you, right? So we have 48 school districts, and although we love to ask them for lots of information, sometimes it's hard to get them to respond, but I will say we got 32 school districts responding to this survey on this.
In like a week.
Really good.
Yeah. In a matter of days.
Yeah, in a matter of days. So I'm really excited by that. So we have basically 13 districts that participate in E-Rate. But I will say, some of them say these issues are still problems for them, even though they're trying to participate in E-Rate. I will say they really lack some expertise in being able to file for E-Rate. So I know Clem does a lot of work, but there's a lot of stuff they have to do, and they have to have a lot of expertise that they have to build, and so they really struggle with that. And so some districts go out and hire a consultant to help them with this. Some districts say, I can't afford to hire a consultant to do this, and I get that. Some of them lack infrastructure expertise, right? So that's kind of like I was talking about before, right? If you're bringing in somebody to fix the machines and help a teacher in the classroom and stuff like that, that's really different than understanding the network infrastructure and being able to go through and figure out what you need and all of those pieces to be able to do that. Where we have no matching funds, that's that discount piece that Clem was talking about. So if you have funds and you have to cut, the E-Rate will pay for some of them at 60%, so that the districts have to come up with the other 40% of the cost of the equipment that they need to put in. And then you're like, I just don't have that 40%. So that's what that's talking about. We have one that just said, listen, it's easier to do it through major maintenance, right? Major maintenance will pay for what I need, and so I do it through that. Remember, this is about like at a school level, right? So it may be that I have $100,000 sitting in E-Rate waiting for me, but that's for my high school. And what I need to upgrade right now is my middle school, and there are no middle school funds left. And so it really is like part of their system that may need upgrades, they may not have funds for anymore, and they can't take from one school and use it in another.
Laura, can I add something too? Just one other extra reason why, when you see literally the money slide, talking about all the money, when you see all this money left over, just another, like I said, we've my organization has talked about Category 2 all across the country, and it's not just in Wyoming, but districts do have good reasons for not using some of this money, exactly like Laurel said. probably a flaw in the program. Hopefully, maybe they change it someday, but that's way above our we're working on it. It's way above our pay grade. That's the FCC. But I mean, it's not a perfect program, right? So like Laurel said, if your high school has everything it's needed, but you've got $100K left for the high school, but then you really can't do anything. Or you could, but then also, I mean, I've thought about this many times. If I were in that tech director's shoes, I answer to my superintendent. I steward taxpayer dollars. And so what I would have to do whenever I ask my superintendent, hey, we need this, this, and this upgrade, I have to go to my board. I have to get board approval. It really depends on what the process looks like for every district. But that's me putting my butt on my line and saying, hey, I think it's going to be a good use of our taxpayer dollars, and you guys are the guys who are elected officials. I mean, that's a, you know, it's not so simple, right? Like, it's a big ask, and especially, you know, if you have an 85% discount rate, that's like an 85% off sale on any equipment. But if you have a 40% discount rate, that looks a lot different. And Wyoming really varies in its discount rate. And of course, that discount rate is per district, right? So when you're looking at a 40% district, their conversation they may be, you know, having inside of their head is going to look a lot different than the 85%.
And again, based on free and reduced lunch rate. That's where that discount
And
rate.
rurality, how far rural they are.
Yeah,
There's a couple of things.
Rural gets a higher percentage. Yeah.
Yep. So we got the last, like our last bigger slide up, and this is, I wanted to kind of throw this out there. So this is why, and part of the reason why it's good that we're talking.
Mm-hmm.
So remember, Clem said that districts have like a 5-year rolling budget. So as soon as you kick off, if you use E-Rate, then your 5-year clock starts, and it starts for all schools. So even if I am in Albany County and I use it on Slate Elementary, it starts the clock for my E-Rate for all of my schools. So if you look at this, we've got the fiscal years up here, and you can see that we have, for this fiscal year, we have $1.7 million sitting on the table with 17 school districts who started their clock back in 2019 and still have $1.7 million that will expire at the end of this fiscal year. So if they are not actively,
they don't apply by
they're not applying now, right? Like Clem was talking about that schedule. So if they're not applying right now, then these funds will expire and they will lose access to them. And so you kind of see, so every year, that's how many the dollars that are at risk and how many school districts that involves. I will say the 2023 deadline, we have 12 school districts for a total of almost 900,000 that have not accessed their E-Rate at all. So, and we know that the program is, we're waiting to figure out what's going to happen. So we hope that those continue. We hope that the funds will still be available, and we don't know exactly what it'll look like whenever they decide to renew and upgrade the E-Rate, because we're not sure, right? It was that 5-year pilot that Clem was talking about, so we have to figure out what they're going to do next. I will say the chairman of the FCC, Chairman Pye,
yeah,
thank you, is very interested in rural and making sure it works in rural. I do know that.
He's from rural Kansas. Yeah. He's from a rural part of the country.
So we do know that, but we have to see. We know across the nation they're saying, please do this at a district level and give us more flexibility and those kinds of things. So we hope that there's some opportunities, but we have to be really thoughtful. In some of these districts, there may be some opportunities where we can really do something now, soon, provide some support so that we can make sure we access these funds. And again, those in the 2023, if they're not actively pursuing it now, that's funds that will go dead and they can't access them if you don't start the clock this year. So with that, so this is it. This is kind of what I was saying, right? That if you started in 2015 when it opened up, you've got a 5-year cycle. It'll end this year. We had not, especially with those communities, when we put this together, even the report had not come out yet about the success of the Category 2 E-Rate program. So we want to make sure that you guys know there's some caveats. We can do a lot now, but we don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future. There's still some uncertainty, but until we have something new, we'll continue this.
Can I add something there too? in case you can't read that little footnote, basically saying that the Wireline Bureau, which is the source of this report that came out just Monday, like Clem said, just 2 days ago, they recommended the rules stay the same. So I'm going to be very, very, very conservative and careful with what I say here. We do not, like, we are not telling you it is done, it's renewed. We don't know that. We only know that whenever the FCC says, like, check, it's happening. But it does seem,
It's very favorable.
it's favorable. It is favorable, but I also just want to be very, very clear that, like, I'm not saying, like, until it's set in stone, I don't want to, you know. But that being said, all of our subject matter experts kind of back at the ranch, and I mean, like, the State E-Rate Coordinator Association, and folks do think it's favorable. They do think it's likely to happen, and so while we don't know, it's definitely worth a conversation for us to kind of start teeing that up and start thinking ahead about if there's all this money. Granted, maybe some of it wasn't used for good reason, you know, for X, Y, or Z reason because of the faults of the program that we explained, but there's still a non-zero amount that's worth having a conversation about. So.
Well, and even as the program gets renewed or whatever happens in the future, I'd rather have us sitting at the table ready to talk so that we can help districts at the very beginning, because it's really hard to do this now that we're in the middle of the application cycle for the last year, right? And so if we have our ducks in a row early, there's a lot more opportunity to make sure that we can support districts at the very beginning, so they can help them plan and those kinds of things to be able to effectively use the funds. And I think I'll leave it to you.
So I think the takeaway from this is, the question is, why are we spending state money when we could be spending Fed money? That's sort of it. We think as a collaborative members, as we talk, that most solutions are solved with a simple conversation. And that's sort of what we're inviting you guys to be part of the conversation, to figure out how we can efficiency.
Like the stuff Paul was talking about, we wouldn't have known that,
yeah,
right?
We
like,
wouldn't know that. That's right.
That's a perfect example.
Invited to the table.
Yeah.
So
get Paul on the table.
Back to slide 1, the win-win-win. Who wins? Well, the first win would be Wyoming taxpayers. The second win would be School Facilities Commission for not spending your money, use it for other stuff. And the third win, most importantly, Wyoming students. Any questions? Sharon?
Thank you guys for your time. My name is Sharon Dennis. I'm the Facilities Director and Technology Director at United County School District. I just want to kind of talk and build a little bit about how this can be a win-win and how you can, in a successful way, leverage those E-Rate funds, which has their own nuances, their own red tape that you have to go through, in partnership with using your major maintenance funds. So, give you an example. We qualified back in 2015 for about $400,000 as a district. We needed to desperately upgrade our wireless system throughout our entire district. So we went through the process of qualifying for E-Rate funds, recognizing that our percentage, the E-Rate was going to pay for 80%. The district or some organization was going to have to come up with the other 20%. So that's when, at the time, I went to our facilities director and said, look, typically major maintenance can pay for this, and we could go through and say, hey, it'd be 100% that you guys would pay. How would you like to only pay the 20%? And as a result, it was a win-win. The E-Rate funds came in, major maintenance paid for 20%, and we were able to go through that process. But as was mentioned, it is something, and it's similar to putting together facility plans. You've got to be thinking a year or two in advance. What are the big projects that you need to be doing? How can you then utilize E-Rate funds? What does qualify under major maintenance? What doesn't? So as we know, a firewall isn't going to qualify, but a network switch, those things do. And so just being able to work together. The one thing I guess I would pose to you, as we know when you're using major maintenance funds, it's replacement of. It's not adding to. So the question that I might have you consider, maybe for another conversation, is if E-Rate is paying 70, 80, 85%, can we then use major maintenance funds to add to?
That is the question. Thank you, Jaron, appreciate that.
Thank you, Jaron. That's
Well
funny,
put.
I was about to be like, I see some tech directors in the audience, maybe we could get an example. I will say too, Jaron is being humble, and I think he is downplaying the extent to which, like, no, I mean, you probably, like, nothing's free, right? Nothing's really free. And so I think the thing that Jaron didn't mention is, like, that takes time, that takes effort. I'm sure he worked a few more hours to make that happen. Ultimately, that is, I mean, I'm just being very direct with you. This is going to be a little more work on the tech directors, but I think this is also what we're asking is, like, how can we, let's be very transparent, put it in front of them, and, like, how can we make this process as easy as possible for the tech director? So while he's being humble about it, but I mean, but it is possible. It is really possible. And actually, Corey, do you mind? So Corey, he now works for Education Superhighway because his wife was offered a position as a nurse practitioner in Oregon, so then they were moving away from Sheridan, but he was the tech director in Sheridan 2 district for 10 years, so I think you have a good anecdote if you want to talk about that.
We did a lot of construction up in Sheridan there during those years, and it was before the Category 2 changes came up. And so we actually had a lot of new buildings up there with new equipment in them that was supplied by the school's facility commission. When it came, to be, if you look at Sheridan's budget, you can see in some of those that they weren't able to use some of their funding because they already have new equipment that the state paid for when it could have been paid for with the funding from the E-Rate. And so when it comes to major maintenance and it comes to that, it just seems like when the state is in the state that it is now and needing to find efficiencies, that using this E-Rate program in coordination with your state funding would be a win-win-win.
Thanks. I feel like we've talked to you guys for a while, so we should. Do we have any questions online?
Just make sure we say it loud enough for them. They have two ways of doing it. They can raise their hand and let us know, and I will unmic them and they can talk over the internet, or two, they can type the question very quickly, and we will read it off and answer it.
Great.
So
Just want to make sure, yeah, there's also an online audience, so want to make sure they're also being able to ask questions.
So far, nothing yet.
Cool.
All right.
Can I hand it back over?
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate it a lot. There is a lot of things that we can learn yet. I can tell you that. All right. Thank you all.
Yeah,
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.